Oh, setting up your meeting for Facebook Live. Not quite yet. I'll let you know when it's going.
Oh yeah.
Is everybody expecting 4:30?
Yeah, kind of, but we're
Oh, we're a
we're
little
getting
early.
we're getting there. Yeah, 3 minutes
Hmm.
early, but
We'll
it should be
setting up your
fine.
meeting for Facebook Live.
Oh yeah, and I see it that you're live, Josh. Oh,
Okay.
and I'll go to your page.
Okay. And we're there.
Yep. Hi everybody. We're setting up as we speak.
We already got some early
Oh,
early
early
takers.
birds. Oh boy.
Eric Bell, Jim Walsh, Dan Schnell, Leo Potts from my Cal State Long Beach days. Eric Bell is going there now. Cool. Long Beach State.
All right, I shared it as well. So
Great.
then I guess without further ado, we can start this. Let me put this on mute. Okay. All right, for all of you early birds out here on the World Wide Web, welcome and thanks for joining us for the West Coast Jazz Hour episode number 4. Today, with obviously Josh Nelson, piano player, composer, arranger, yours truly, Kevin Van den Elzen, drummer and band leader, and a very, very special guest today, bass player, composer, arranger, educator, one of my personal musical heroes and mentors, Mr. John Clayton.
Hey guys,
Yo,
glad to
So
be
John.
here.
thank you for joining us today, John. We're both super excited to hear some of your knowledge and your stories about the West Coast. Let me start it off with I'm very curious about you're from here, you're born and raised in LA. Um, this is a thing that I actually don't really know about you, but how has the West Coast scene, specifically from the 50s and the 60s, how has that influenced you? How did you basically roll into that kind of music? Because I'm sure uh, you've been you've been in touch with that music and with those people and all of that. So we would like to hear something about that, how you rolled into it.
Well, having grown up in LA, the club scene and the music that was available to me um, was always, of course, naturally played by local players. So the people that were living in LA at the time, some of them still here, were all those names that I would see on record covers and things. You know, it was Gerald Wilson, it was Harold Land, it was wasn't Carmel Jones by that time. You know, it was gosh, Bobby Bryan, Snooky Young,
Mm-hmm.
just all those West Coast people, Shelly Manne, Lou Levy, Jimmy Rolls, all those people. That when I'd go into a club, I didn't know half of these people's names and reputations, but there they all were. So I was brought up on that, weaned on that. But at the same time, of course, I'd go home and I'd be listening to records which had no geographical pin. You know, it was just
Right.
everybody from all over the place, and I was just checking it all out. So growing up here, um, which is kind of a question I think for all of us, but growing up here, there was no West Coast jazz sound to me.
Mm.
It was just jazz. It was just great players playing, and it would be bebop, it would be swinging, it would be, you know, it would be kind of out, sort of avant-garde, however you want to whatever you want to phrase that. It would be totally experimental. It was just like it is now. It was then. Of course, there are many more influences on the music now because we're so many more years further down the line. But it was it was kind of the same.
Mm.
And some of the songs that pretty much all the songs I've chosen uh, represent the fact that music was being made on the West Coast. But if you didn't know these recordings, would you be able to categorize it as a quote West Coast sound, whatever the heck that is?
Right.
And that's always I scratch my head about that. Huh? West Coast sound? There's a West Coast sound? Wow, okay. Because if you look at the list of people that represented the West Coast in the 50s and 60s, there were names like Charlie Mingus and Eric Dolphy and uh, Gerald Wilson and a long list of all these people who, I mean, later on, some years later, Cedar Walton lived here. Herbie Hancock lives here. Wayne Shorter lives here. Uh, Billy Higgins lived here. So all of these names kind of makes me go, uh-huh. But they live here. They're on the West Coast. Does that mean that what they do now has to be categorized as a West Coast sound or approach? So that's sort of that question that I throw out there, like, oh, what is a West Coast sound? So I've picked some
Mm.
pieces I think that, like I said, if you listen to them, I don't know. I don't consider it a West Coast sound, but I'm curious to know if other people hear these things, if they say, oh yeah, that's West Coast, man, that's West Coast.
Well, for my understanding from what I've seen from West Coast, like, and for me, this is more specific about the large ensemble stuff, and then people like Billy May and Nelson Riddle, Buddy Breckman, Terry Gibbs, those guys that really who have made a career from out here. That is to me what is like a West Coast thing. But
But
the
that to me, that's and I yeah, I don't, of course I don't disagree with that, but it's just to me it's leaving out some other really important names like Gerald Wilson,
of course, yeah,
like
Gerald.
Horace Tapscott, uh, like before he moved east, like Mingus. There were all these other really great things going on that kind of just showed the diversity of tastes and styles and music that was going on here
Yeah.
during that time. So I agree with you. I just think I would add more names to that list.
Yeah, of course. I didn't even know that Mingus lived here.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
From here.
yeah.
yeah.
Well, you learn something every day, I
Yeah,
guess.
yeah.
Well, let's that's super cool. That's super cool to hear. Let's go right into the music, and John, just let me know what you want to pick first.
Well, this is a song that was recorded in LA by um, two of the three musicians lived in LA eventually. When this was recorded, it's Ray Brown, Sonny Rollins, and Shelly Manne. Shelly lived in LA at that time. Uh, Ray Brown was soon, a few years later, to move to LA. So
Hmm.
he already had a nice relationship with LA. Sonny Rollins, of course, had always been on the East Coast. So, again, here's this awesome music made on the West Coast by one and a half West Coast musicians,
Right. Yeah.
uh, and categorize it however you will. But this is just some of the most killing music I'd heard. And again, the story leading up to that is that um, Ray Brown had been in the studios the whole day before, and then they started the session at whatever ridiculous hour at night, 11, 12, whenever it started, and just played. And this is awesome music, if you ask me.
Hmm. So I'll play it for you, Josh. I get the notification that host disabled participant screen sharing.
And
I
Josh is
think
frozen.
that Josh is frozen. Oops. And his computer also froze. Oops.
It says you are the host now on mine. So
Yeah,
you're
okay. And we're still also live on
okay.
Facebook.
So I'll wait for you guys to come back on because you can play. You can play the track.
Yeah, yeah, I can just play the track. I just have to see. Yeah, we're still live. So I'm just gonna play it.
Okay.
Oh, and am I not the host right now?
Oh, I think I am.
Are
How
you
can
the
I be
host?
How can I be the host? I'm the visitor. I'm just visiting. The monkey live here. So,
Ooh.
um, let's see. If you tell me how to play the track, I'll do it.
Yeah, if you go to share screen,
Yep.
then there should be a notification where you can go to advanced.
Okay. Got it. Hang
And
in there,
then,
people.
yeah, and then you can share your music or audio.
Okay. Got it. Okay.
And I should be seeing, yeah, and now you're sharing your computer sound, and now you can play it, and the rest of the people and myself can hear that, what you're playing on your computer.
Wow, learn something every day, like you said. Okay, here we go. Let's see if I can pull this up, and it's Sonny Rollins. Here we go, hopefully.
Sorry, guys.
No worries. We're still live.
Good. So we-
Ah.
Ah, it's great.
Yeah,
So
I mean,
great.
I mean, Sonny, Sonny to me is probably one of the best improvisers ever.
Mm,
To be able to stretch like he can,
mm,
and I always think back on East Coast Broadway Rundown with him
mhm, mhm,
and Elvin,
mhm.
and poof,
Yeah.
how that
Oh,
guy knows how to stretch is just
yeah.
incredible.
Yeah, when you listen to this track again, um, listen to it with the ears of understanding how Sonny Rollins is swinging the bass and drums. So it's not just like this play along background thing behind him. He gets so in the middle of what they're doing that there's no question of where that groove is. And that's one of the things I think a lot of musicians, rhythm section players, also love about Sonny Rollins. Not only the creativity of his lines and overall creativity, but he just syncs up with rhythm sections to the point that at least I feel like he's really swinging us.
Mm,
I love that.
that's killing. Yeah.
That reminded me, John, of a moment I heard you at Blue Whale with Walter Smith, Ben Wendell, and Mark Ferber. Do you remember that
Oh
show?
yeah, sure, I remember that.
And
Yeah.
'cause I was just listening to that track with Sonny and hearing how much Sonny's influenced Walter's sound and kind of his approach and just to me his general presence in the music. And that was a really great concert of people who either lived on the West Coast or had lived on the West Coast and kind of come together East Coast, West Coast. And that night, chordless group too.
Yeah.
That was a special night of music
Oh,
of like minds, great minds.
yeah. Thanks. That was fun. Yeah, and it's again, it makes you wonder: are we now beyond what you would call a situation where you can define a West Coast sound from a Houston sound, from a Chicago sound, from
Right.
a New York sound, as far as jazz is concerned?
Mm.
I don't know what you guys think about that.
Well, I think I mean what I definitely agree. Um, with what you said earlier. Like it's very hard to put a stamp on it, and I also don't see really like the use of putting a stamp on it, but because
Hmm.
people from all over the globe now are collaborating and putting new things in the mix, you know, like jazz
Hmm.
with different kinds of styles and all of that. And I've seen that in the past 5 years when I moved out here. I
Hmm.
saw all of these people like Dave Binney moving back, and you know he's really you know a master in putting
Yeah.
all kinds of influences together. So
Hmm.
in my opinion, there doesn't need to be a stamp on
Yeah,
it.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, you bring up a really good point. I mean, in my mind, I guess the West Coast sound might be represented by place, studio recorded at, maybe the engineer who gave it its sound from that perspective,
yeah.
maybe.
Hmm. Hmm.
A club, I have a live club date that I'll play for one of my examples that might put location and place with it, but
Hmm.
it's with a mix of people who lived both on the East and West Coast. So
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah.
it doesn't have a sound. It just has it's just great great
Yeah,
music. Like you're
yeah,
saying, it doesn't
yeah,
need
Yeah.
the labels. Interesting. Yeah,
yeah.
good point.
Yeah, I have an example of that too, of sort
Hmm.
of like a cross thing of people coming together from both the coasts. Yeah. So maybe we can go over to Josh. John, I think you're able to make Josh host again.
Oh, okay. How do I
So
do that, Josh?
so you go actually to his screen and you click the blue
Hmm.
square, and then I
Yeah.
believe you're able to say that you're gonna make him host again.
I've got chat or pin video.
Do we need to do that, Kevin?
I can't screen or I can't share my screen because it
Oh,
says host disabled participant screen sharing.
oh. Well, then I can. I think I can enable that.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, perfect.
Yeah, I think I have to do that. I think because I originated it, right?
Yeah.
Oh, so yeah. So did you just take over again, Josh?
Not yet. I'm about to.
Please do. Somebody's got to lead this ship.
Sorry,
Okay.
everybody, for watching on Facebook.
Yeah,
We have
thanks
some
everybody.
minor technical difficulties. So,
Yeah, sorry about that. I had a computer crash and just ran out with my laptop in the main room, and I'm surprised it's still going, but I'm glad it is because this is
yeah.
having a ball with you guys. Just this is great. So yeah, this is from Live at Dante's, a club that I know you know, John, and
Hmm.
probably played at.
Hmm.
Um, and I never got to visit this club. It closed before I had a chance to. But this is one of my favorite vocalists, Carmen
Ah,
McRae, Great American Songbook. I thought I'd start with a little bit of Carmen. I just love this record. It's two albums, and it features a phenomenal band. I just love this band. It's Jimmy Rolls on piano, Joe Pass on guitar, Chuck DeMonico on bass, and Chuck Flores on drums, who I got to
Nice.
play with a little bit in his later years.
nice.
So yeah, this is her version of "At Long Last Love."
Mm.
Is it an earthquake or simply a shock? Is it the good turtle soup or merely the mark? Is it a cocktail or this feeling of joy?
Mm.
But is what I feel the real McCoy? Is it for all time or simply a lark? Is that Granada I see or only Asbury Park? Is it a fancy not worth thinking of? Or is it at long last love? I wanna know, is it an earthquake or simply a shock? Can that be good turtle soup or merely the mark?
Mm.
Is it a cocktail? This feeling of joy, or is what I feel? Can it be the real McCoy? Is it for all time or simply a lark? Can that be Granada I see? Only at Barry Park. Is it a fancy? Not worth thinking of. Or
Man.
is it as long? Is it at long last? Is it at long last? Can it be long last love?
Nice. Nice.
You worked with Carmen, right, John?
I did. I was in her band for a while and did some projects with her outside of her band and recorded with her a couple times. Uh, but this is cheating, man. Was that in the 60s?
70s.
Aha! That's a different ball game.
Yeah, I know. Well, we've been focusing so much on 50s and 60s. I kind of thought I'd sneak a couple 70s. Actually,
I
both.
like, I started to do that and thought,
Did you?
oh man, no, this is like, oh, this. But anyway, I love that and thank you for playing that because
Sure.
I haven't listened to that in ages, but like you, I absolutely love that record. I mean, that whole Satin Doll thing that she
Oh,
does with
Chuck and her.
Chuck
Yeah,
DeMonico, and
it's so great.
I think it's Thelonious Monk's on that record too, right?
Yeah,
Ballad of Thelonious Monk.
that's right.
Yeah, I mean, I love that record. That's just,
So good. It just actually really reminded, and I know, of course, you play with Carmen, but just listening to it reminded me of you and your sense of swing and just your history in the music. But then I also remembered that Sarah Gazarek, who I worked with for many years, gifted me that record,
Oh, no kidding.
and the connection with you with her, and that kind of path.
Yeah,
So I
yeah.
was like, oh, and I just love the short two choruses. You sing the whole thing, and the
Uh-huh.
second time she just wails. No one did it quite like Carmen did, in my opinion. And this is 1972. She was still singing great.
Hmm. Yep.
Amazing.
That was a more normal way of
Right,
doing songs back then, and music's going down other paths right now in terms of how songs are laid out, structure, and all that
right.
arrangements, which is fine. But I played countless singer pieces like that were arranged just for, and it harkens from the era of the songs that needed to be more or less that length for radio play,
Mm-hmm.
and then sometimes you go to hear people perform live and they'd open it up, it'd be longer
Right.
and stuff like that. But so yeah, you remind me all these cool things I've always loved about Carmen. Just she, uh, I did a record with Ella Fitzgerald with the Basie band, and I had my headphones on, and Ella was in the booth, and I overheard her say about this song, "Boy, this has some dumb lyrics." She's basically, talking to herself, and I went, and as embarrassed as it is, I have to admit that was the first time I ever thought about, oh, you mean like singers pay attention to the meaning of a song? And it seems so obvious, and I should have learned that message earlier. But so I got that. I got that from Ella. But the person that opened my eyes to delivering a message, to really making sure that you felt the meaning of the lyric was Carmen. If you heard her sing, unless you weren't paying attention, you could feel when she would say, you know, and he'll be big and strong. You would feel big, or you'd feel, or if she'd kind of suddenly be really uh, introverted, or just kind of go inside herself, and you could hear how she was helping the lyric take us to that place. So
Mm.
she was queen of that for me. I mean, other people, obviously, gazillions of singers do that, but that was the first time I'd experienced it um, with somebody at that level. And of course, I got so many Carmen stories. I mean, the first words, I was working, I had a duo gig with Jimmy Rolls at the Century Plaza Hotel. And,
Wow.
and Carmen lived not far away, so she'd come down and hang with him, basically. Yeah, she knew him really well, obviously, and I got to meet her. And one day, after we were done with the gig, it was an early kind of gig, she said to him, "You want to come up to the house?" And they were going to party a little bit, let's just say that. So I said, Jimmy Rolls said to her, "Hey, can I bring Blood with you?" He used to call me Young Blood. He called me Blood for sure. "Can I bring Blood with me?" And she said, "Oh, yeah, sure." So the first words she ever spoke to me, we got in her Mercedes Benz. I'd never been, I mean, I'm a ghetto boy. I grew up in Venice, and not the good part of Venice. It was like, it was actually on the border of the quote good part. But anyway, I didn't know anything about this. Was my first time in a Mercedes Benz. So I got in the back seat, and I just did like we always did when you got in mom's car. Grabbed that back door, and I just kind of gave it a good yank. And the first words she ever said to me, she swung around and she said to me, "You don't have to slam it." So yeah, that was how I started my relationship with Carmen. Oh, yeah, it was. She was intense, but she always, and then um, I almost played in her band when I was younger, but um, I auditioned for her at her house, and she heard me and said, "Hey, Kay, sound good. Well, we got a gig coming up in San Francisco, and I'll give you a call." It was great. Well, it got close to the time for the gig, and she didn't call, so I called her and I said, the San Francisco gig is almost there, and I just wanted to know if you have any details for me. And she said, oh yeah, you know what? I got somebody else for that. And I went, oh, kind of a shock. But I'm thinking, well, okay, swallow hard. How can I move forward? I said, well, okay. Listen, are there any things that I can do to better prepare for playing with you or whatever? And she said, well, my favorite bass player is Ray Brown. You need to listen to more Ray Brown. This woman is crazy. Because, of course, the only person I was listening to was Ray Brown.
Right, yeah.
But anyway, many years later, after having done a bunch of other things, including going to Indiana University and, traveling with Monty Alexander and Basie and going to Holland, then when I came back to LA, then it was sort of clean slate. She probably didn't even remember that. I'm sure she didn't.
Yeah.
But it was a whole new ballgame after that, and we became very close.
Right.
Beautiful.
And during that time when you met her, you were already, I guess, like studying with Ray Brown, right?
Yeah, his class that I had taken, the workshop in jazz bass for that one semester at UCLA, had already ended. So I was just I was going to LA Valley College. I was doing local gigs. I was studying privately with my classical teacher, and I was also playing electric bass at that time. So I started taking lessons from Carol Kay. So I had all these things going on, and meeting Carmen McRae was a part of that. Because around that time is when I also played with Jimmy Rolls.
Right. Well, I guess I'm gonna play something for you guys, and this is also a thing that is sort of like across of the coast, I would say. I'm gonna play something of this. It's the Jerry Mulligan Concert Jazz Band live in Santa Monica, and this is the band that he also took over to Europe, because we were just talking about Live at the Vanguard, and that has Clark Terry on trumpet, but this is Conti Condoli taking over for Clark Terry. So it's Conti Condoli, Nick Travis, Don Ferrara, Mel on drums, Alan Ralph on bass trombone, Brooke Meyer and Willie Dennis on trombone. Jerry Mulligan, Buddy Clark is playing bass on this one. Bob Donovan, Gene Quill, and Jim Reeder. And this also features Zoot Sims on it, but I don't think he's on this recording.
Who did you say was on drums? I'm sorry, I missed it.
Mel Lewis.
Mel's on drums. Okay.
Yeah. Josh, I still can't share my audio for some reason.
Oh, okay. I'll make you a host. I made you the host. How does that work now? Can you do it now?
Yeah. Perfect.
Technical difficulty.
Yeah, technical difficulties.
All right, guys. At least we're still going here.
All right, I'm sharing. This is I'm gonna just play like a short excerpt from it, but this is an original from Jerry Mulligan that he wrote for Johnny Hodges, 18 Carats for Rabbit, and it's an arrangement of Bill Holman.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Woo.
They in those liner notes of this cover, it says that this was the hottest big band in the '60s, because it was right before Thad and Mel started their band. I think that happened right after Mel got back from the tour, the European tour with Jerry Mulligan, that they started the band and doing that first date at the Vanguard.
Wow.
But yeah, as you say, like there's so many influences. You have like a couple of guys who are from the East Coast. You have a couple of guys from the West Coast, and then you have Holman also making the arrangement for Jerry. So this is also like a nice example of, you know, like crossings of the coasts, if you will.
Yeah. I mean, but that's that's the nature of music, and definitely the nature, the an important component to jazz. The nature of jazz is to have these influences from wherever, whether it's the Baptist Church, the Catholic Church, the from Brazil, from Cuba, from, you know, we hear something, we're just like, whoa, that sounds cool. Let me have some of that and add it to this. It's just, it's always been that way, and hopefully it will always be that way.
Mm-hmm.
And every time there is a kind of a joining of different influences and things, there's always going to be some pushback. People who maybe don't relate to that, you know, which you'll hear people who say, well, I don't relate to smooth jazz, or people who do relate to smooth jazz that don't relate to bebop, blah, blah, blah. It's always some kind of, but it's all about, go ahead, dare, add something to it, see what you get, and see if it helps you express yourself, you know, because it's all this is just a tool of expression,
Mm-hmm.
you know. So, you know, your expression might be that you lean more toward jazz that's going to have Brazilian influences. Who knows? Whatever. Cool. Because somebody else is going to have some other. That's one of the things I love about what we do.
Is that something that the view that you just mentioned is what? Where did that start? Because I think from your career, being in Monty's trio is a perfect example of him putting together jazz with all of those Jamaican influences.
Oh, definitely, Monty represents that, and in a very obvious way. But I was getting it here too. I mean, when I was younger in LA, I'd hear, you name it, some other older generation musicians that were checking out what we were doing. You know, I was doing electric bass, like I said, as well. So I really was checking out all those great Chuck Rainey, Jerry Jamont, blah blah blah, all those wonderful electric bass players. Carol Kay, of course, is my teacher. So I was doing, you know, boogaloo stuff. So it was interesting to hear the older generation, in quotes, doing their straight ahead thing, and suddenly they'd put it aside and put their hands around some boogaloo, and see, it wouldn't sound like Bootsy Collins or whatever, but it would still be their version of how they wanted to do it. Cool.
Mm.
You know, so it's kind of, it's always been that way, and it was around me, like, yeah, like everybody.
Right. Well, since I'm still sharing my sound, I can play something what you picked, John. So
Oh, okay.
tell me which track you want me to play.
Let's do um, let's do a little. Well, yeah, let's do a little Scott LaFaro. Excuse me. Scott LaFaro, you know, was living in L.A.
Yeah.
Living in, he's from this area, and he um, he hooked up with Victor Feldman, who is British, but moved to Los Angeles, and they did a wonderful album called The Arrival of Victor Feldman with Stan Levy on drums. Excuse me, and it gave Victor the chance to show off because he could play vibes, he could play piano, he could play whatever he got his hands on. But this represents kind of where bass playing was going. People were sort of expanding bass concept and sound and such, thanks to this young Scott LaFaro. I'm not sure, but this may have been the first recording he made, definitely one of the first ones he made. And he the changes that he made in the playing were, first of all, his strings weren't as far away from the fingerboard as most people. So most people, of course, had their strings because they were using gut strings, not steel strings. There were no steel strings at that time, so everybody was using gut strings. In the late '60s, steel strings started to be introduced on all instruments: violin, violoncello, bass. Anyway, Scott LaFaro was, with the kind of music that he played, wise enough to lower his strings so they weren't so far away from the fingerboard, enabling him to employ a different kind of playing technique. So he didn't just play with one finger, he played with two fingers. He's one of the other bass players did too, but he's one of the guys who really pioneered that. And it gave him more, all those things combined allowed him more flexibility on the instrument. And you can hear when he plays, not only does he have that, quote, more modern sound for some years, but he still is steeped in that groove and that drive. So when he's done with his bass solo, just check out the groove that he plays with Stan Lee.
Killing.
Anyway, it's a song called Sposen.
All right, I'm gonna play that. when
choice, John.
Yeah.
he
I
when
love it.
when LaFaro comes out of that bass solo and he starts walking, man, that's some truth. Holy,
Totally.
together with Stan, that's some serious swinging time.
Yeah.
Jesus.
Yeah. You know.
Yeah, it's nice to hear him in another context. Obviously, a lot of people, including myself, know him so much from Bill Evans' trio, but to hear his, an earlier recording with Stan, it's just that the nice connection they have, and his beautiful lyrical solo. Wow,
Yeah. Yeah.
I did not know. Yeah, that's great.
He's great.
And Victor switching between vibes and playing piano.
Yeah.
Talking about showing off. Yeah.
Yeah, man. Sheesh. Good stuff.
Yeah, that was killing.
Yeah.
Josh, I'll stop sharing and then you can take over.
Okay, thank you.
Do I have to make you host or?
I think so. Maybe just
Yes.
yes, you do.
Yeah. There you
Thank
go.
you. So this is an interesting segue that, one of those happy accidents that sometimes life just gives you. But I always feel like with John, there's some history we have connection-wise, but I'm always learning something. And then there's like a moment where we're like, oh, this was perfect. I'm glad I picked this track because it features Ray Brown. It's a Ray Brown solo. And it really reminded me of Scotty's playing, actually, when I heard it. This is from a record from a lesser-known pianist that I got to know later in his life, who worked with Ella Fitzgerald for many years, from late 50s to I think the late 70s. Paul Smith, who played on this record is Ray Brown and Louis Bellson. It's called Heavy Jazz, and it's from 1977 on the Outstanding Records label. And I just love this Ray Brown solo. I'm going to kind of cue it up near, it's Over a Foggy Day, the Gershwin tune. And just, hope you like it. Okay, share. after when they come out there, he kind of continues to solo. I didn't want to take too much time,
Oh
but it just
man.
kind of reminded me, I guess, of Scotty's kind of approach. But of course, classic Ray line and feel and letting the time kind of be what it is. It always so grooving though.
Yeah, yeah.
Every time I hear him playing, this is late '70s Ray.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
it just always um, he took the approach to soloing that other bass players did as if he were a horn player. You know, play lines that you would sing, play lines that you would play as a horn soloist. Because one of the challenges of being a bass player is that you happily lay down the groove and the roots and the bottom that everybody needs to build on top of it. That you do that for more than 90% of the time that you're playing, and then somebody throws you a solo on a song. If you're not careful, all that stuff that you've been doing for so long ends up kind of rooting your solo in that mold. So you end up playing basically the same role that you did before, but now nobody's playing and it's your quote solo. So you can do it that way, and that's totally allowed and viable. But you can also choose to, like Ray just did, approach it more like a vocal solo or a sax solo or another kind of a horn solo and play lines like that. In other words, forget about the role of a quote bass player holding down the groove. Now let the groove continue underneath, but you can do whatever you want in terms of your solo and floating on top of it and doing like everybody else does when they play a solo that's not a bass player or a drummer. So yeah, he was one of the masters of that, and one of the people. What happens when you have that approach? It's a question of which comes first, the chicken or the egg. But when you have that melodic approach to soloing as a bass player, it automatically, naturally feeds itself into your bass line construction. So your bass lines are less predictable and more melodic. They're still fulfilling the role of holding everybody together and giving everybody the roots and stuff to build on top of, but they're also interesting melodic lines. And Ray Brown was one of the kings of that. People like
Mm.
Ray, Israel Crosby, um, the list, Paul Chambers, Ron Carter, so many people that Scott LaFaro we were just talking about, uh, Red Mitchell,
Mm.
so many other. I don't know. I really love the bass lines that Buddy Clark was playing on that example that you played, Kevin.
Mm.
People forget about Buddy Clark. He was
Yeah.
one of the co-founders of Super Sax.
Mm.
It was his idea.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah,
I didn't know that either.
Wow.
Yeah.
he and
Yeah,
Ned Flory.
we had him on that Jack Sheldon record, I think.
Yeah.
Buddy Clark. Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, with most of those bass players that who were from here, like Buddy Clark and Monty Budwick and Red Mitchell and all of those guys, that's the thing that stood out for me. That first of all, their beat was ridiculous, and then the way how melodic they respond, especially in that band of Mulligan, where there's no piano, or Mulligan would play piano from time to time, but it's basically a cordless big band. So
Yeah,
he had
yeah.
all of all of the space to do that. Is there like a favorite rhythm section for you, John, with Ray that you say like, oh my God, like that's the thing for you?
Wow. How do I boil that down?
Yeah.
uh,
Well, I'm asking like for you personally, like.
yeah. I mean, well, I was introduced to Ray on record by hearing him with the Oscar Peterson Trio. That was the first recording I ever heard him on, and that blew my mind. So immediately there was a lot of exploration into Ray and his playing with Oscar. And it was only after some time that I started, kind of going, wow, what else has this guy done? And then I discovered all the stuff before that and continued to hear him with rhythm sections after. But so definitely the Oscar Peterson hookup. Uh, but so many others, going back and hearing him play uh, with Dizzy, hearing that hookup that Ray had with Buddy Rich, for instance,
Mm.
hearing him with Louis Bellson, hearing him with Kluk, hearing him with all these people. Um, I, the thing is, people say, yeah, Ray was so strong. You play with him, you had to go with, man, that was so untrue. I mean, yes, he was strong, absolutely. But Ray Brown, when he would play with people, he was absolutely aware of the hookup that needed to happen with the rhythm section, with the drummer, with everybody else in the rhythm section. And it's not that he would, he was just totally pliable, but he was really trying to see how does my impression of or my focus on how the groove feels and sounds, how does that hook up with you? I'm not trying to change you or change what you do or force you to come over here, but let's see how that hooks up together. And that really was his. I don't know if that was his conscious approach. We didn't talk about that much, but that was the thing that I noticed when I heard him play with people.
Mm.
I remember we were playing, coincidentally, a gig with the WDR big band, and it was Ray Brown, Christian McBride, and myself. And at some point, we were doing a song. Ray was playing the bass part, and I said to him after the run through, I said, Ray, can you lay back a little bit on this particular song? He said, yeah, no problem. Boom. He did it immediately. So these people that think that, oh, Ray Brown, he just naturally played on top of the beat, or he just naturally rushed, or he just naturally blah, blah, blah. Ray Brown once told me, people think, it makes me so mad, people think that I just rolled out of bed and could play like this. he said, I practiced time. I worked on my groove. And he was so good at it that people just say, oh man, he's a natural. We're all naturals, but there's a certain amount of work, certain tasks that go into it. So yeah, anyway, Ray Brown definitely with Oscar Peterson, but also with other, hearing Ray with Jeff Hamilton.
Right.
I think Jeff is the drummer who understood Ray Brown's grooves more than anybody. And he played with him for, 18 years or something like that? Something crazy.
Mm-hmm.
No drummer played longer than Ray Brown, than Jeff Hamilton. So think about all of those years of adjusting, experimenting, talking that went down. So he really, hearing them together was always magical.
Mm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I mean, for me, that it goes for hearing you and Jeff also together, because in my first week that I moved out here, I went to Newport Beach and I saw you and Jeff playing with Larry Fuller, and it was a tribute to Ray, and you guys played arrangements of that, and it was an hour and a half or so, but my right foot just I couldn't keep it still. So that was I've never seen Ray live, unfortunately, but that was for me an experience that goes in that kind of direction. And I've felt it with playing with you too, just make something together out of it, So I totally can see that, that coming from him, that you took that over. That's just, that's one and one makes two for me.
I don't know if I took it over. I definitely was influenced by that. He and so many other musicians left big impressions on me.
Yeah, yeah.
One of my early jazz, full-on jazz show at the Hollywood Bowl that I ever got to see was you with Christian McBride and Ray Brown that night in the early '90s. I want to say it was. Milt Jackson was on the bill, and Benny Green played with Ray with Greg Hutchinson, and I was just blown away. It was an all-star night, and I was right in the front.
Wow.
And I waited for everyone's autographs at the beginning. Good memory.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
was maybe
I remember
good.
two things about that. One, um, well, actually, I'm not sure the second. So the main thing I remember about that, that just really floored me was Ray Brown walked out, and Christian and I followed and stood on either side of him, and he announced to the audience, "If you don't like bass, you better leave now." It was that just totally broke any ice that might
Yeah,
have
Yeah.
formed.
it was my first introduction to you, really, it live. I mean, I hadn't seen, and Christian was just coming on the scene with his new records and stuff, and I of course knew Ray from Oscar Peterson, but I was just blown away. I'll never forget that. Yeah, that was a very formidable, pivotal moment for me, and a quote unquote West Coast jazz for me. Like, oh, this is West happening on the West Coast. It's happening in LA, but
Yeah,
it feels like it's everybody too. It
yeah,
feels like it's both coasts. It's whatever.
yeah,
Just great
yeah,
music.
yeah.
Yeah,
Borderless.
Yeah.
borderless.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good word for it.
Mhm.
Well, I think I'm gonna play a thingy again. So, Josh, could you? Let me see.
Yes,
Yeah,
sir.
I have to be the host again.
Yep.
All right.
Voila. You were the host.
Voila! Great. So I am going to. This is going a little bit into a different a different direction, but by coincidence today it's the 100th birthday of Peggy Lee, and I'm gonna play something of a record that I just found out like a couple weeks ago. It's with Nelson arrangements of Nelson Riddle, and it was kind of tricky to find out who is playing on this, but I found some names. Our own Gene Cipriano is on this. Buddy Collette, Pete Condoli. I wasn't sure if he's on bass, but Joe Comfort is being credited as the bass player. Sweets Edison, Lou Levy, Ewan Racy on lead trumpet, Barney Kessel, and Mel actually on drums. Question mark, because I'm not completely sure if it's him. But this is Jump for Joy.
Hey, fare thee well, land of cotton, cotton life is out of style. Honey child, jump for joy. Don't you grieve, little Eve. All the hounds I do believe have been killed. Ain't you thrilled? Jump for joy. Have you seen pastures groovy? Green pastures was just a technicolor movie. When you stomp up to heaven and you meet old St. Pete, tell that boy to jump for joy. Step right in, give Pete some skin and jump for joy. Have you seen pastures groovy? Oh, Green Pastures was just a technicolor movie. When you stomp up to heaven and you meet old St. Pete, tell that boy to jump for joy. Step right in, give Pete some skin and jump for joy. Oh, joy, yes, joy, just jump for joy. Oh, joy, oh, joy, just jump for joy. Oh, joy.
Oh yeah, that's sweet. I've never heard that.
Yeah, the record is called Jump for Joy, and
Okay.
it's really great. All of the arrangements are really cool. Nelson Riddle at his best. Which brings me actually to a question. You did an interview with Kathy Siegel Garcia a couple weeks ago, and Ray Brown actually introduced you to Henry Mancini,
Yeah.
if I'm not mistaken. And then
Yes.
you went on the road also with Henry Mancini. So my question is like, uh, you obviously had also were influenced by these arrangers and composers,
Hmm.
besides being a bass player, but for your own writing. So I'm like pretty curious, like how Gerald Wilson and how Nelson Riddle and Mancini, have inspired and influenced you as a writer.
Uh, if they all have, consciously and not. I mean, I growing up in LA, you're right. I was able to hear Gerald Wilson, and I was able to hear and play with Mancini, and hear Don Ellis, and hear all these different things that were going on at the time. They were always once a week they had big bands at Dante's, for instance. Um, so yeah, I heard a lot of stuff that was really left big impressions on me. But I wasn't really writing big band stuff. I was just enjoying it and playing in them as often as possible. But it wasn't until years later that all of those influences started to really surface,
Mm-hmm.
including Henry Mancini. And at at some point, I did actually go to Hank and say and ask for his thoughts on things, or he was always so giving, man. But he was a quiet guy, but he was a strong force and didn't like the limelight. He was embarrassed by, too much limelight. He just wanted to be one of the guys, hang out with musicians, write awesome music, conduct. So he was, yeah, I think that I appreciated his humility when he would conduct or when he would rehearse. He would do, he was so much one of the guys, guys and gals. He was so much one of the musicians that, for instance, if we were doing a movie or something, uh, I'd be in the studio or whatever, and he might see that we were supposed to stop recording at 6 o'clock, and he'd finish all of the music at 5 to 6. Most people would say, "Hey, great! Wow, we're done. 5 minutes left to go." And Mancini would say, "Hey guys, take out that cue one more time. I'm really not happy about bar 37. Let's do that again." And he would go into overtime so that the musicians would get paid more money.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the kind of stuff he did. He was really quiet about it, but you knew what was going on. If you heard about one of his musicians that was in the hospital, suddenly that hospital bill was paid. That Mancini is the guy who told Ray Brown, "If you ever move to LA, give me a call. I'll make sure that you work." And he was the catalyst for getting Ray Brown to work a lot in LA. So anyway, Mancini, and then other people really influenced me. I got a lot of wonderful help from Johnny Mandel.
Mm-hmm.
I got great help because often it's not the people you study with, but it's the people that you study.
Mm-hmm.
So I studied people like Mandel, and I studied Gerald Wilson. I mean, I transcribed their music as best I could, try to understand what they were doing. And you listen differently when you write a lot. So you enjoy the whole thing just like everybody else is, but there's another part of you is going like, "Damn, that sounds so good. What's he doing, or what's she doing?" And you figure it out. Like on that one thing you just played for us, at some point when it was really beautifully big and intense and everything, then I go, "Oh, okay, 3 layers." I can hear the strings playing legato lines. I can hear the saxes playing a unison counter melody, and I can hear the band, the brass in the band, playing playing kind of a hit version of the melody. So the melody
Right.
was always in our ears. So all those three layers were going on, plus the rhythm section being the fourth layer. I wonder if that was Mel though. I didn't.
Yeah,
I
I'm.
didn't quite feel Mel for some reason.
Yeah, I'm also in the in between about if it's him because well here's the thing, the album is from 1958, and in 58 he recorded with Stan Kenton live at Palo Alto, and then after he went to do Contemporary Concepts with Kenton, and that is a sound that he used, like a heavier sound, heavier floor tom, actually a higher pitched tom tom. But that's like a very, very short particular period where he had that kind of tuning. So
Interesting. Okay.
there's also another guy credited to play drums on that record. But the time wise and the couple of there are a couple of fills over that record where I'm like, that's not Mel at all. But then there are other things that give it away, like, oh, the great feel and the sound and all of that. So I'm honestly, I don't know.
So, what about the guys that played with Nelson on all the Sinatra albums? You know, Irv, could it have been Irv?
If, it could have been Irv, yeah.
And also, I mean, also when he was playing, when he was chopping wood, you know, playing the rim on Tune 4, it sounded bigger than what I recognize as Mel doing when and if Mel ever would do that.
Yeah, yeah.
But, you know, you're the boss.
No, no, I'm not. I thought actually also about Irv because, and that's the thing that's such a cool thing that I've seen of rhythm sections that composers and arrangers love certain rhythm sections. Like Billy May would always have Alvin Stoller on all of his sessions.
Yeah.
Mancini loved Jack Sperling.
Yeah. And also Shelley Mann.
Right,
When I
right.
played with Mancini, it was for the TV show. It was with Shelley Mann. That was my first chance to play with Shelley Mann. He loved Shelley.
Well, a lot of people. I do love Shelley as well. I think still Shelley is highly underrated, but so creative, so musical. And I've had talks with Jeff about this too. But you know, like, and with Peter Erskine, he also said that Shelley lots of the times is underrated because of Mel, because everybody, everybody knows about Mel, and still though in drummer world wise, like I don't really hear of a lot of drummers who actually dig Mel or Shelley or Jack Sperling or Alvin Stoller. It's like sort of kind of like a thing that I see with a bunch of, like my friends, but not really as a general thing.
But it's the same thing with bass players. If you mention bass player names that played with a lot of those guys, the world's not going to know. They're not going to know Jimmy Bond. They're not going
Right.
to know Buddy Clark. They're not going to know Monty Budwig, etc. They'll kind of run across their names here and there, but unless you're a musician, you're not going to know a lot of these names.
Yeah.
So I agree. But I think it's the same. And I wonder because Shelley Mann versus Mel Lewis. I think that Mel Lewis might have been in a little bit of Shelley's shadow in terms of name and popularity, because in the 60s, that's when Shelley started his jazz club.
Yeah.
So that was, saying Shelley's manhole was a household phrase in the jazz world, whereas
Right.
people really didn't know Mel Lewis.
Yeah.
Unless you're an insider.
Yeah, it's funny to see how that basically reversed, because Shelley was on television a lot. Mel didn't really do that, and I've heard from Jeff also that Shelley wasn't difficult at all with changing his sound for a certain production, like take off the drum head or do a different tuning. And Mel was always like, nope, if you call me, then you get me, and you'll get the thing that I have to offer.
That's true. That's exactly right. What was I going to say about Shelley? I always had the impression that Shelley needed to be current. he needed to feel hip. He needed to be hip. I don't know if he needed to feel it, but he really he didn't want to just do everything the same way he had done it for years. He he wanted to take it out. He wanted to experiment with sounds and colors, and that was. I remember this last thing that is on my list to play for you guys.
Yeah.
I remember it was recorded live at Shelley's Manhole, and I heard this band, and when they were done with a set, Shelley's band would always play the opposite sets. He'd play the following set. So they did this trading thing where for at least 4 sets a night, it would be the invited band and Shelley's band. The invited band and Shelley's band would close. So they would do that all the time, especially on weekends. But anyway, yeah, Shelley, he was very inspiring for me.
Yeah, I can imagine so. Well, let's go right ahead because I'm still sharing, so I can play that thing for
Okay,
you
yeah.
that you want me to play.
So this really begs the question, what is a West Coast sound? Because here you've got Ray Brown, who lived in LA at that time. You've got Teddy Edwards, also lived here at that time. I do believe that Dick Burke had not moved to LA at that time, and he might have been doing gigs with Monty Alexander, because he did play some with Monty Alexander. Monty Alexander's on piano, who of course is from Jamaica. Not too long before that had moved to New York, and Milt Jackson. So here you've got this, again, borderless sort of band recording in LA, playing in LA. That was my first time at a professional jazz club, and if this would have been a drug, I'd have totally been a junkie. The walls, they would swing so hard that the walls were moving. You felt like they were just liquid walls. The audience was swaying to the groove, and all these guys they were playing this incredibly hip, intense music, smiling the whole time, looking at each other. Milt would finish a solo, and he'd play his last note on the vibes. He'd hit the vibes. He'd just kind of go, and he'd kind of swing around with his big smile on his face and look at the rest of the guys in the band like, damn, that was fun. It was just, that was the vibe. That was my introduction to live jazz playing.
Wow.
Was how they did it. So yeah, there are other people who prefer the dour face or, not smile. Fine. But that was my introduction. And then to see Monty Alexander playing with Ray Brown at his left hand, and he's looking up at him and he's smiling, and it left a huge impression on me. So this is a Teddy Edwards song. This is from the album That's the Way It Is. So again, it's Milt Jackson album with Ray Brown as sort of the featured guest or co-leader, with Monty Alexander on piano, Teddy Edwards on sax, Dick Burke on drums. They used to do this every summer. And at Shelley's Manhole was the first time I heard Monty Alexander. And before that was my dream to play with Oscar Peterson. When I heard Monty Alexander, I said, I want to play with that guy. I still love Oscar Peterson, but I want to play with that guy. So that's how it all happened for me. Anyway, this is a Teddy Edwards song called Wheelin' and Dealin'.
All right, here we go.
Yeah. Pretty
That's
intense.
that's very intense. That's super
Burning.
swinging.
Wow.
So if you can imagine going to that club and hearing that music live, feeling that air move through the room like that, oh man. And
And
So
then,
right now, I crave it more than anything. When that you could go to a
yeah.
club and feel that, I felt like I was there listening to that. Oh,
yeah,
amazing!
yeah.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
Wow.
you could totally hear that how much fun they're having, and like Ray is shouting like, eh!
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Very cool, very cool. And I was, again, that left a huge impression on me, and showed me that if you so desire, you could have this approach to playing this music, with the focusing on everybody else and the smiles and the having fun and all that stuff. You could do this music in a serious way with those elements.
Mm,
So it was a wonderful inspiration.
right on. Well, I think that with that being said, we're gonna wrap it up, I guess, because I don't have anything to add after that anymore.
I just want to
um,
add one quick thing,
yeah,
because John, uh, thank you so much for being here, John, and sharing your stories and your wisdom. That you are a huge part of. You probably know this, but to everyone out there in Facebook land, huge part of my development as a musician and learning the craft. And what you just said about communication on stage and how to bring that in to what I'm trying to get across emotionally, and acknowledging that, and watching you do it, and then getting to play for you when we were doing Lionel Hampton Jazz Festival, and just thanks for all the guidance over the years. You were a big part of my musical development, still are actually.
Wow.
yeah.
Well, thank you, man, and both of you guys. I'm so proud of both of you guys, man. You any little lessons that I had for you, you put both hands around them and just ran with it, and that what an amazing feeling, a feeling of being honored that somebody is listening to you. And again, we're talking about Ray Brown a lot, but as you've heard me say, he's the one that taught me. He said to me, "I'm helping you because somebody helped me, and you're going to help somebody else further down the line." And
Right.
Right.
so that's exactly the thing that you guys understand and are doing now. But
Yeah, yeah. I would like to add to that. Like I met you, John, when I was, I think, 17 or 18 in Amsterdam for the first time. When
mhm,
you came in with the Clayton Brothers quintet with Terrell, Gerald, and Obed, and you worked. I wasn't part of the big band concert, but you worked the whole week with the big band, and that week was totally inspiring for me. It was probably one of the best weeks that I've had in undergrad. But then a couple of years later, when you came back for the first time, and that I was able to play all of the Clayton Hamilton charts with you with the big band, that was for me such a
mhm,
momentous, like thing. And then a couple of years later, that you and Jeff gave me the opportunity to play in the sound check with the big band at the Concertgebouw, and that was for me the moment where I knew, like, okay, I gotta get my ass over to LA, because this is the shit that I want to do, and I want to be around you guys. So yeah, like I have a lot of things to thank you for, and um, like, yeah, that's all that I have to say about that.
wow, totally my pleasure, man. Like I said, I'm proud of you guys. Keep the move, keep doing it. Stay
All right.
open.
Well, everybody on Facebook, thank you guys so much for watching and listening to us. JC, thank you again for all of the stories and all of these wonderful recordings that you showed to us. That's definitely going to keep me occupied for the next couple of weeks to listen to this. And Josh, you again for joining me, and we'll be back hopefully next week with another guest. So everybody take care.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, John.
You guys. All right.
Thanks, John. Okay. And we are on. Let's see. Stop.